The Harvest Festival from the Cathedral of St. Canice here in Kilkenny City. This is the seat in which the Church of Ireland bishops of Kilkenny are installed, but under it is the old stone going way back into the 6th century, in which traditionally the bishops and before them the abbots of Ossory, as Kilkenny then was, were enthroned. As anybody who is familiar with the cultural and especially the sporting life of this county of Kilkenny well knows, Kieran is indeed the great saintly name around these parts. But in some ways, and especially in the matter of name, Canice takes precedence over him. He was a little low-sized chap from away up in Derry in the north of Ireland, where he was a friend of Colm Killis, and he came around this diocese, as it was then known, of Ahaboe, and he set up his church here. And of course that was the Church of Canice, Kilkenny, and hence Kilkenny. Looking down from these windows with the great towers and turrets and battlements all about me, one can't but be impressed by the sheer size of the place and the magnificence of the building. And that of course is right, because it was in its time a place of great power and of prestige, as indeed befitted one of the great bulwarks of colonial power in the Ireland of its time. The Butlers ran this illustrious house as an Anglo-Irish dynasty almost through several centuries. And here in the long gallery there are portraits of them and of the kings and princes and potentates with which that famous Butler family was associated.
If all those ethereal charms which I gazed on so fondly there were
This house was built by one of the rich merchants of Kilkenny close on 400 years ago. That was before the plantation of Ulster, which was to have such profound effects upon the life of Ireland right down to our own day, and before the rising of 1641, which was caused largely by that plantation. That rising of 1641 led to the Confederation of Kilkenny. Here, contemporary European politics spilled over into Ireland, the politics of the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. And within these very walls would have come together members of the old nobility, Irish and English, yes, and Spanish and Italian too, like Colonel Owen Roe O'Neill, back from the Spanish Netherlands, and Archbishop Rinuccini, the papal delegate from Rome.
Well, the business today really is we sell primarily Irish craft products from all over Ireland. We have products from potters down in Dingle to weavers up in Donegal to clothing manufacturers in Dublin. So, you know, we have a good variety of product from all over the country.
How many suppliers have you now here?
We have over 350 suppliers at present in many different areas. For example, can I just show you that little brooch there from one of our youngest suppliers, a girl called Glenda Stanley. She's an 18-year-old schoolgirl. You know, so enterprise is alive and well in Kilkenny, really. I mean, this is a good example of a young person, you know, earning a little pocket money for themselves.
Well, what's the dynamic in forming now the success of an operation like this?
Well, I suppose it's always easier when, you know, it's a private company and you're here every day and you're dealing with the problems on a daily basis. In big organisations, it can be difficult. You're often waiting for, you know, a board up there to make a decision about something, and meanwhile the problem is continuing on the ground floor. So, like, I think it's being able to make quick decisions and get on with it, really.
How many people do you have employed here, Kathleen?
At present, we have 23 full-time people and about 10 part-time people.
What's the wage bill weekly?
Well, annually it's about £250,000. So it's, in national terms, it's probably a very small amount, but, you know, on a local level, it's, you know, it's a big responsibility, really.
How about the possibility now of people doing things like this in other parts of the country?
I'm sure it's probably happening as we speak. I mean, I think people, a lot of it is about being in the right place at the right time, and I suppose having the courage to take the opportunity and kind of run with something and take the risk, you know. So what if you fail? Just get on with it and do it. What
kind of a staff do you have, Kathleen? Are they good, energetic people?
I have a fantastic team of people working for me, and I'm most fortunate in that it makes the job easier, and at the end of the day you have to enjoy what you're doing.
Would you regard yourself now as a good motivator?
You'd have to ask the staff that. I like to think I am. I mean, I do my best, and I get a good response from the staff. But you've got to work on it. You know, it's a daily thing. It's not something you do once every now and then when you're in the mood. You've got to work at it every day.
Training for employment, hopefully to train people so that they're training for the crafts, which is a commercial enterprise, and in the end we would wish that they would be able to export work rather than themselves.
Well, is it happening for you?
It is. The Crafts Council runs 3 courses. The business skills course, we're standing amongst the work of a number of people who set up businesses over the past 4 years very successfully. This work represents part of that success. The other 2 courses are more geared towards providing people with skilled workers in their established workshops, and those courses would be showing about a 90% success rate in finding people employment after training.
Well, with the craft industries, it's unlikely that you'll be able to get employment going on the same basis as, for example, digital in Galway.
Well, craft businesses are, by their very nature, often quite small in size. There would maybe be anywhere from 3 people up to 25 people. So their impact individually is small, but their impact overall throughout the country can be quite large. For example, not far away from here, there would be 4 businesses in the country that would employ about 70 people. Now, digital isn't going to go into a rural scenario and create 70 jobs. And those 70 jobs will still be here in 5 years' time, and there may be even be more, hopefully. Craft jobs are slow to grow, but they're also very slow to be got rid of.
How about the quality of the product? Is that crucial now to the success of ventures like this?
The craft business is really about making beautiful objects for a very discerning market, and that discerning market requires high standards.
Have you had any really outstanding successes?
A very rewarding success in terms of training for employment was a young man who came to us from Sligo who'd not got his leaving certificate, who was dyslexic, in fact. And as a 17-year-old, on completion of his training course, a 40-week course in Thomastown, near here, he went straight into a job in a pottery. Now, not only was he good enough to get a job straight away, but within 2 months, he was poached by another pottery who offered him more money. Now, that's a good story. It's a very rewarding story to think of somebody in that position.
Could you see craft enterprises like this operating on a more widespread basis throughout the country generally?
They are already, to an extent, happening on a national scale. There are good commercial craft enterprises all over the country. Kilkenny is renowned as the craft capital of Ireland. It has a higher proportion of businesses perhaps than any other county. There is no reason why an expansion cannot take place and more craft businesses be established in the 90s around Ireland, as there have been already. But that will be based on quality of design and quality of production. And as long as we can guarantee that, we can get those businesses.
Eddie Dawson, Dublin.
Selena Coyle, Derry.
Gilbert Henry, Sligo.
Marina Kelly, Galway.
Brian Martin, Wexford.
Ciarán Breen, Dublin.
Maria Lindsay, Belfast. Margaret Rutter, Bray.
Una MacDonald, Fermanagh.
Neil Kelly, Kilkenny.
Other citizens were tenants, servants, or workmen
to the noble families and merchants of the town. All workmen to the noble families and merchants of the town. 600 years ago, most houses were made of timber. The transition to stone buildings, although gradual, was well developed by the time Roath House was built in 1594 by John Roath and his wife, Rose Archer.
Well, Nicky, this was the old mill in which your father and grandfathers for generations milled grain to make flour with. Now it's a pottery. How did it all begin?
Well, in fact, the family is still involved in the milling business, and I have a cousin across the river who's actually making wholemeal. But I came here about 17 years ago, back from England, and I wanted to set up a pottery. And the mill was available shortly after I came back. So I ended up actually developing the mill as a pottery.
It strikes me as a brave venture now, this does. How many people do you have employed here?
We have 25 people employed.
Very labour intensive. Could this happen in other places?
It could. It's quite, I think that all one needs to develop a business like this is to try and develop a product which is excellent. It works well in the marketplace, and then market it. I think that's the most important thing.
How about your own training, Nicky? You went to Japan, I believe. Were there things you wanted to change when you came back, or did you want to adapt things here to what you learned in Japan?
There were. When I went to Japan, I had this great love of the Japanese pottery and everything, which is very, very different from anything else in the world. And when I went there, I stayed for a year, and I began to realize that the Japanese did their own thing extremely well. But really, what I should be doing, instead of aping the Japanese, was to try and do what we can do well, and base our own business on our own tradition. And we've taken an old decoration technique which was developed in Scotland and in the north of Ireland, and it's the spongeware technique. It's a very simple, basic, low-tech technique, and we've developed that. We've got our own power here in the mill from the old days, and we have a turbine which generates the electricity for the kilns. We have our own clay, which we dig ourselves from Tipperary and in the north of Ireland. We blend that ourselves and sieve it and make it into a proper clay. And we have our own labour force, which is totally local. Everyone here is trained on site, and we make all the stuff ourselves.
Well, from Bennett's Bridge on the banks of the River Nore, a small but vibrant centre of the arts and crafts of this island, we return at last to Kilkenny Castle. It's a place which has seen its kings and queens, its princes and princesses, the Dukes of Ormond and their duchesses down through the long centuries. And the castle stands still proudly overlooking the city, which, who can deny it, has certainly made its contribution to the life of this rich and rare land.